to establish July 1st as a National Engineer Day here in Mexico. This date was proposed because on July 1st of 1776, that is 245 years ago, exactly this date, a royal certificate was issued for the creation of the Royal Mining Court in Mexico, which this gave rise to the creation of the Royal Mining Court here in Mexico, and also the foundation of a teaching and research center known as the Royal Mining Seminar, where the first study plans and texts for the first engineering schools in America took place. Well, dear attendees of this conference, The Art of Being a Female Engineer, given by Professor Sheryl Grace from Boston University. With this conference, we seek not only to celebrate the National Engineers Day, but also would like to express our interest here at the university of more and more women joining this profession. Dr. Grace is an example of success as a woman, as an engineer, and I would like to give a brief overview of her professional career. She obtained her bachelor's degree in applied mathematics from the University of Akron, Ohio in 1989, and a master's degree also in applied mathematics from Oklahoma State University in 1991. In addition, she also received a master and a PhD degrees in mechanical engineering in 1993 and in 1995 from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana in the United States. Since 1995, she has been with Boston University, but also has held positions as visiting faculty in Tufts University and also in Cambridge University in England. Among her multiple awards, we can mention the Faculty of the Year Award in Boston University, the Insight into Diversity Inspiring Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Award, and she is also an Associate Fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Dr. Grace has been responsible for obtaining $3.6 million for technical projects, and very important, almost $250,000 for women and in science and engineering initiatives. She has published 70 reviewed journal and conference articles on her research interests, include computational unsteady aerodynamics and aeroacoustics, and also her interests in research are also oriented towards computational prediction of cavitation with applications to fuel injectors and to rain interaction with hypersonic vehicles. Well, this is only a very short list of her many achievements, but I can certainly continue listing many, many more of these achievements. However, I believe that both you and myself are more interested in listening to her. So I will give you Professor Sheryl. Go on, Sheryl. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gonzalez. I'm very happy to be with you today for this National Engineers Day. I was told that there's a very strong Society of Women in Engineering program that has grown out of the university there, and that's great. I love to hear that. And so I'm happy to join you for this celebration. So let me say that today I'm going to do a few things. I will talk a little bit about that path that it was in my introduction, and a little bit of my research interest with some pictures. It always makes it a bit more interesting. And then talk a bit about some things very related to women in engineering. As I go, my overall point for the whole talk is to share with you some nuggets of information people have told me, some tips, some things that have helped me over the years, and I want to share them with you today. So the first tip is be yourself. And so I'm going to start with who I am and expand a little bit on that very kind introduction that was given. So I grew up in what's called the Midwest of the United States, the eastern part of the Midwest, and I grew up in Ohio. When I was in high school, I liked the music things, I liked sports, I did fine in my classes. And so the question is, what does someone like that choose to do in college? Well, first, I did go to college. And what I chose was to try to play my sport and then pick a major that would be compatible. And I started in computer science. I liked math and science in high school, probably as most of you. And I had some older cousins who were in computer science and had graduated and started working with IBM, which was new at that time. And I thought, oh, I'll do that. But I had some troubles getting my codes to work, and I'd stay up quite late getting them to work, and I wasn't playing my best tennis. So I needed a change. And I asked a professor that I had in one of my courses, and he was joint between math and engineering. And he said I should take mathematics because if I wanted to do my sport, then it would be more compatible. So I did. And I finished, graduated. I didn't drop computer science altogether. I kept it as a minor. There's a picture of me there way back when with my sister and my brother. So this is to say that I came from a family of 3 kids and I was in the middle. When I finished, I thought, okay, I played my tennis for 4 years. I studied, I did fine, but I thought maybe I would take 2 years and really just study, focus. So I had an opportunity to go to Oklahoma State and I went. That meant that I went way over here. I hit my limit in math. I called back to that same professor who had given me some advice when I was choosing my major. And he said my trouble was he always knew I was a frustrated engineer. And he linked me to another graduate program where I could study engineering. So I took his advice and I went to University of Notre Dame in Indiana. So that was my 3rd school. This picture I want to put here because when I joined, they put a picture of all the graduate students who were at the program, Aerospace and Mechanical. And I circled here, that's me. And then there were 3 other women, and that was it. I think now the board looks different, but that's what at the time. And I want to say that Professor Gonzalez is one of these in here. Very hard to see, a little fuzzy on the picture, but that is where I met Professor Gonzalez at first. So I want to tell you that changing fields was difficult, but I am still happy that I relied on my mentors who told me, maybe try it. Another thing that became very clear when I was there was that I did need to become better at asking for help. And I'd always had the ability to find what I'll call my pals or my friends. But in this case, it became clear to me that what would happen was I would be able to help them with some of the mathematics behind certain things we were studying. And they would be able to help me with some of the basic engineering that I didn't have because I didn't do it as an undergraduate. So I found this ability to work together very helpful. The other thing that I'll say came very clear to me at this point, and I then kept it going now into 20 some years later, was that I had been able to stay in touch with people from my undergraduate, my first graduate program, and obviously family. And I found that having those connections and those groundedness were very helpful when I did get confused or stressed or worried about this difficult change I was making. I was able to call on them and rely on them. And I have also just told you that I met Professor Gonzalez back there. This is a picture of him with his wife way back then. And what I want to say is that these kind of connections, so today, because I'm still connected with him, I have this opportunity to talk to you. So it's something that I suggest people do, keep those networks being built and keep them energized by taking the effort to keep in touch. Another thing that I will share with you is I did finally graduate with my PhD. And along the way, it became very clear that I had to work on sort of confidence in my work. I would put the time and effort in, but I always knew that you can't be perfect. And it was hard for me sometimes to give a presentation and not worry about someone finding a mistake or, just maybe confidence. But I think that what we need to do is dig in and find our confidence. And so what I want to share with you is it was at a conference. My advisor was very good about supporting the students to go to conferences, and I was willing. And I gave a talk on my research. And there were lots of people in the room who were very expert in the field, not my specific take on it, but in the field. And in the room was a professor who was the chair at Boston University at the time. And because of that talk and the way I answered the questions with a little bit of confidence, he invited me to apply for the job that they had open. And that's how I ended up at Boston University. I just have a couple other pictures here. Of course, everybody is supported by their parents, hopefully, in some way, and they were able to come for my graduation. And here, this is a picture of a few of us who graduated. One of the other women in that set of pictures, she and I finished at the same time. Two of the others finished with a master's and left earlier. Another little thing is that I did meet a guy named Jeff at Notre Dame, who I ended up marrying. He finished before me, took a couple postdoc positions and waited for me to finish. I got my job in Boston, and he followed. He was willing to come and look for positions there. So I started in 1996 at Boston U. I received my tenure in 2001, had my first child in 2002, and my second in 2005. We did not wait until I had tenure. I know some people choose to do that. It just happened for us that's when we finally had Thomas. So here was that move for my job over to Boston, Massachusetts. And I'd like to tell you something that was passed on to me early in my career there before I had any children. I went to a conference sponsored by our National Science Foundation, and a female faculty member, senior from Georgia Tech, stood up and basically said, "Get a cleaner." And what she meant was, well, she said it. She said, "I take no joy in cleaning. I have no specific skills that allow me to clean. It does not use the skills I do have, and I don't find it important for me to do it." She said, so I hired a cleaner. And that way I don't have a messy house and I can do the work I want to do. So her point was sort of to say, evaluate which things are important to you, how you want to spend your time, figure out if you can find support for the things that you don't want to spend your time on, and make your decision based on the things that you feel are important and how you want to spend it, not so much what society tells us to do. And that really made an impact on me. I came back to Boston and I found a cleaner that day, but it even helped once I had my children in trying to decide, I hired nannies to help us. And I had the good fortune of having a job, which allowed me to do that. Another tip I will say is, no matter what you're doing, keep your eyes and ears open just for what's going on in terms of the climate, or what's happening to people. I will tell you that I got hired at Boston University. I was the fourth woman on the tenure track. So I had 3 senior colleagues. There was another person who was a research faculty, and she was female. This is out of about 25 at the time. So I felt great. It was nice. By the time I got my tenure, I was the most senior person. So the others had left. This happened in other departments. I had colleagues in other engineering departments and other science departments, and they had left as well. And so what I felt like was, wait a minute, at this university, everybody that becomes associate then has to leave. And it bugged me. There was also stuff going on at that time. The new study at MIT, if you don't know about this historically, the women at MIT, the senior women, put a study out that showed, while they had the same number of publications and really had put in as much research, new ideas as their male counterparts, they were paid less, they had less lab space, and they had less chance for advancement within the university into leadership positions. And so that became a sort of a pivotal moment for universities around trying to encourage more women faculty and more women in the engineering programs. National Science Foundation started a program focused on trying to improve the numbers and the participation. And some other programs started as well. So you look around, you see this happening. This can happen in any form, at institutions that are universities or companies. You can see these trends, you can ask some questions, then you have to decide, are you going to say something or do something? I decided it was important that I say something. So I started a group called the Women in Science and Engineering. It was supported by the College of Engineering Dean, who was becoming our provost. And it was, I teamed with a senior faculty member in biology who'd been at the university longer than me and seen a lot of people leaving. And we tried to bring information to the department chairs and deans to talk about this trend that people were leaving, and it's a symptom of something, and then what the symptom meant. So what we saw. I will tell you that I gave my first big presentation to that leadership group, the chairs and the deans, none of which were women, when I was 8 months pregnant with my second child. I think they were a little surprised to see someone with a big round tummy show up at the podium and present what we saw were some disparities and some things that needed attention. I will also share with you this thing at the top. It says, speak up knowingly. I knew that some people might react to my advocacy, but I didn't really know the full picture. Sometimes maybe that's good. I will tell you that my efforts on this WISE group, which went for years, we started in 2004, but I was super active for about 10 years. That together with when I had my kids, I stopped writing as many proposals. It was a choice. I just didn't feel I wanted to take that time. So I ramped down my, my research a bit. And I will say that those two things do contribute to my lower salary right now. There's other things that do too, that have nothing to do with me, but that is an outcome. And you do have to know that there can be outcomes and decide if it's important enough to you to speak up. For me, it was, and still is. The other thing I encourage people to do, if you can, find ways to get overlaps going. So here is an example. I'm lucky in my position that I work with student groups that do aero-related activities. We'll have some evening activities, and I've been able to bring my kids to the gyms and fly aircraft. We've brought classmates and their siblings. This is one of the university students, and this is students from my kids' school. And we've done paper airplane contests and parachute drop contests. I've gone to their schools and worked on some outreach. I do believe we still need to foster an understanding of what engineering is, a love of these kind of how do gizmos work, why should they work that way, get kids thinking about this so that we can continue to bring people into the technical fields. So I'm always roping in my husband. We did bottle rockets at the school. There's one of the little students waiting with her bottle rocket. We've done a catapult. They pulled the string, the water balloon launched. We created in one of the classrooms an airport with all kinds of information about airplanes. Moved to now that they're older, I brought my boys into a shield making project just this last year because the nursing homes in our area needed more face shields. And my university had a great makerspace that would allow us to create them. I mentioned before keeping in touch. This is a combination now of keeping in touch and also, bringing your work a little bit together with your family life. So I do believe it's important to keep in touch with your colleagues as you go from one position to another. I also keep in touch with my students. Now that I've been teaching for 25 years, some of those students go off and they do amazing things. And I was able to take my family to visit NASA Johnson, where I have two past students, one who is an astronaut. He will launch in 2022. And then another who has been in charge of a lot of things in the control room, and also in terms of being in charge of space station operations, sort of where every single item is on the space station. And we were able to visit and see inside of NASA Johnson the way maybe a regular tourist couldn't. So that was very cool. And here my boys are getting a little older. So enough about the path and those little tips. I want to take a little bit of a jump because people do always ask, well, what do you do exactly? So obviously my general field is aerospace engineering, but my research is, as Professor Gonzalez said, unsteady aerodynamics and aeroacoustics. What that means in that traditional field is anything that moves and makes noise or has flow coming past it and makes noise, I'm interested in it. And what I'm usually trying to do is develop design tools that companies can use so that noise can be a parameter that they look at when they're designing. And it's not like make this big thing, figure out how noisy it is, and then try to rectify the noise problem, but actually design with noise in mind. And some of the things that are shown here, an engine on an aircraft, they obviously make noise. Rotors on helicopters or small drone, quad rotors, multi-rotors, or the class in between, which is called urban air mobility, soon to be air taxis in your town, maybe. And then airplanes themselves, just the aircraft with its landing gear and its flaps and stuff, it makes noise. So those are the kinds of things that I've worked on. From that research point of view, another tip that I will bring to you is look for collaborations. And this can be done in classes, when you have projects, if you get to define your project, see if you can define it to be a collaborative project. If you're in a company, most of the time you don't have a chance but to collaborate. But really, I say embrace that. I think it makes the research more fun, and you can definitely take on larger projects in collaboration. So just a few examples. Right now, I have a project on that front end of the aircraft engine, fan noise, and it's together with some researchers at Raytheon Technologies, which is part of the old United Technologies, which is related to Pratt and Whitney, who create our engines. I have this quad rotor, the small drone project. It's a controls project. I bring some aero to it. So there's someone in my department that does that. And now we just sent in a new proposal that includes a couple researchers at Virginia Tech, some researchers at Embry-Riddle, at Joby Aircraft, who is creating these urban air mobilities, and at Tuskegee University. And then this other project that was noted in the introduction, so fuel injectors and cavitation that's related. Cavitation is the onset of a bubble growing and then its subsequent collapse. And it turns out in fuel injectors, this happens. Fuel injectors are in our vehicles, our gas driven vehicles. And now that has led to a new collaboration with some people at Central Florida. And we're having this project where it turns out that there's some cavitation involved with how the rain behaves as a hypersonic vehicle comes in contact. And that can lead to damage on the hypersonic object. So all of these are bigger projects than I would be able to do on my own. And I have loved working with the other people. In terms of the collaborative projects, my next tip is give credit and take credit. And I think for women, this one we have to watch out for and maybe even be a little assertive about. I think in general, most people do give credit and it makes sense. We know we're not doing things on our own. There's always support. There's maybe, one-to-one collaboration, but we need to make sure when giving a talk or when writing something that we keep that at the forefront, make sure people know that we've worked with others. When we give credit, other people see that, they know we're a good partner and they're willing to work with us more. If you have worked on something and someone stands up and gives a talk and they don't say anything about your work, you do need to say something. You need to make sure that you can get that credit. And sometimes it's just an honest mistake by the person and a conversation, it could have helped me if you might have mentioned that. I know you were trying to fit a lot of stuff in that talk, but it would have been good if you talked about the team. Sometimes if you can make it not about you and there's someone else on the team that also could have used some credit, you could say, so-and-so could have used a little head nod to their work. you're telling that person, and the person will realize they didn't acknowledge you either. Once in a while, you actually need to go to the boss and say, or whoever was receiving the presentation, and say, you know, I know my colleague was focused on the content and it was a great presentation, but I really need you to know, because merit and review times come up, you know, that idea he talked about or she talked about, that was mine. And I love that idea and I'm willing to keep working on it, but I need you to know that I had a part in it. So we do have to step up sometimes and fill in that information. So on the first part that I've gone through so far, I guess my summary is, I love engineering. I like that you all are into it and doing it. It is important and it is fun. Everything in our built world and almost always we interact with nature, except to sit in nature and take it in, is because of something in a STEM, particularly engineering field. Note that paths wind. It's very hard to say, I know that's where I'm going to be in some number of years. Embrace it, enjoy it, think the surprise is fun and good. Be open to the new experiences and opportunities and collaborations. Don't be too self-critical along the way. If things don't go as planned, you don't get that job or don't get that promotion, don't always have to internalize it. Sometimes things just happen. And again, keep in touch with those people along your path. You don't know when that network is just going to be needed for support or give you new opportunity. In terms of work-life balance, I actually believe have it all is a bit of a myth. I think it's important for us to define what's important, when it's important, and make trade-offs, knowing that there will be probably some consequences, but in the end, if you're doing what you enjoy, the consequence doesn't seem so strong. Find those connections when you can. Choose a life partner and keep your closest friends around you who are supportive. Very hard to do this on your own, especially if you're trying to do the work-life balance. So let's change gears one more time. Let's talk about some STEM, women in STEM. STEM here, science, technology, engineering, and math. We're just one piece of it, engineering, but we think of the grouping together. So here's something right from your university. Thank you to your dean for getting me this information. It's identical to what we see in the United States and at my university. It says in the end here that you have about 26% of your graduating engineers who are female. And talking right before this started, yes, several years ago when I started at my university, it was like 15%. So at Boston University, if I would have started undergraduate engineering as an undergrad, it would have been 10%. So we're making some gains. The other thing that's true in the US as well as at your university is that there are a couple fields where women actually dominate, environmental engineering being one, and in the US and at my university in particular, biomedical engineering being 50-50, if not 60% women and 40% men graduating. So, but mechanical and civil and some very basic, long-standing programs still have lower representation. In Mexico, the other thing about graduation that's similar is that, so you're showing 26% at your university. In Mexico in general, I guess it's 29%, which is great. In the natural sciences, math, biology, they are showing almost 50%. And that's been that way for a while. So some fields are getting to, graduation rates that are equal. However, when we talk about jobs, it's not always still equal. It's getting there. So this is from the US, but I'm sure that everything is similar in Mexico. What this shows is from 1970 to 2019. And there are trends that are basically upwards, except for the purple one. And this is how many percent women are in the labor force in general, 50%. How many are doing STEM jobs? And it's more like 20-some percent. Then if you break that STEM down, the social scientists are up at 60%. The math and some of the life sciences, biology, close to 50, engineers down here at the 17%. So sort of, this makes some sense. What's happening graduating kind of percolates into the workforce. The numbers are all a little lower. So maybe 50% graduate. In the workforce, it's maybe 48%. We always lose some as we move to the workforce. Same with engineering. Maybe we're graduating 26%, but we're only, when we look at final employment, just under 20%. Another thing that we need to keep in mind and has been debated, I have my opinion on it, which I will give you. So I believe this graph is similar to the graph that we look at in the United States, which is something at a university that says, here's how many people are graduating with PhDs. Here's how many people are assistant professors. Here how many people are associate, and then full. And what we see is that as we move up in senior rank, the percentage goes down. So we go from the number that are available, percent women, 42, as the time you get to the senior level, it's 20-some%. Now, people have argued with me that this is simply because you have to be older to be senior. And when the older people were in school, the numbers seemed like 15% or 10%. Now there's 26%. So the numbers should be able to, when this generation gets older, we'll see a number going up. So I've argued this at my university since 2004. Why I argue this is that biology, just take one of the sciences, biology has been a graduation rate of 50-50 and PhD graduation rate of around 50-50%, men, women, forever. And our senior faculty went through when it was 50-50. And we still see this shrinkage in the number. There is a problem with retention and promotion. And I claim to people, I'm willing to work to get the assistants to, 40 or 50% here. I'm willing to work on that. But I bet it's not going to percolate down here because the other side is still not working hard enough on retention and promotion, my opinion. One other quick thing I'll throw out there, I think everybody has heard of it. There is a wage gap. It's a wage gap in the States. It's a wage gap in Mexico. These are from Mexico. People with degrees. This is the women's number and the men's number. This is associate degrees, I think, licensures, and then doctorates, the same thing. So there is a wage gap. Very complicated what goes into that, but I think some of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute do contribute. Okay, so what do we know? Why are there fewer women? Why is there a wage gap? Well, we don't know for sure. No exact answers. But what we do know is the lack of female scientists is not correlated when people do studies. They do the sociological studies, they lay down all the markers, all the parameters, they do the correlations. It is not strongly coordinated to hormonal or chromosomal differences. It used to be thought maybe women weren't as good in math. Math is a requirement for engineering in particular. And so this is what's wrong. It's not true. Right now in the US, in the high schools, more than 50% in the maths, upper maths classes are women. They're taking the tests at the end. They're doing fine. It's not about some kind of gendered math difference. There is a very small difference based on gender in how we do 3D mental rotations, but this does not hinder people choosing engineering. And most schools are thinking about in their first year programs, adding a little something to make sure everybody gets to the same playing field with the 3D thinking, because especially in certain engineering fields like mechanical, it is a player, it is important, but you can learn it. What people have shown from the correlation studies is that the lack of the numbers of females has to do with what the females pick to go into, their preference, and that their preferences are really due to sociocultural influences. So the culturally prescribed gender roles seem to influence what they choose. People develop beliefs that they can or cannot pursue different occupations because they perceive those occupations as either appropriate or inappropriate. And I think this is easy for us to understand, hard to overcome. So the bottom line is, you have chosen engineering, which is great. We need to make it clear that others can choose it. We need to make it clear that you can stay in it as you move out of the undergrad programs into the workforce. Women engineers, we are a minority. We definitely work in what traditionally has been a male-dominated field and will be for probably a little while longer. What are some things that if we know about them and we tell others about them could help change the climate, change how people perceive us as women engineers, and maybe change how many people accept positions in the engineering field? First thing, I'd like to know if everybody has access to their little hands on the, I see the people on Zoom here. How many people have heard of the sociological term implicit bias? Not exactly sure how that translates in Spanish, but have we heard the term implicit bias? Anybody with a little hand up? It's not something it's talked a couple, okay. It's talked about a lot in the States. Now, it took a while, but the idea of implicit bias is that all of us, every human, has attitudes or stereotypes, I'll just read it here, that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions, and we don't even think about the fact that it's happening. They come from our culture, from social media, from television and ads, and just seeing people in our neighborhood, how people respond and act. What we know is once we think about them, if we want to change them, we can, if we're cognizant of them, if we think about them. There is a great study online by the person who coined this term. Her last name is Banerjee. She's at Harvard. And there's this test that you can take just to see if you naturally, in a very quick, no time to really think, associate certain terms together, like male and engineering fields, if it just happens. And even if you don't want it to happen, if you happen to associate woman with doctor or man with doctor, certain things. So it's something that's ingrained in us just because of who we are, how we grew up, who was around us. An example, a good example of this is a resume study that was done. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's good to talk about and remind ourselves of it, even if you have. Here in the States, someone put together a resume for a lab manager. They sent it to 100 researchers in science, engineering, math, who might be hiring lab managers, and just said, fill out this form where you evaluate some things about their competence, whether you would hire them, what salary you would give. Hypothetical, they did not have to be hiring at that time. The resume went out to half of the people with a male name on it and the other half with a female name on it. Everybody filled out their form. There were men and women evaluating the male. There were men and women evaluating the female. What happened was the female was perceived to be less competent. Exact same resume, different name. The people who reviewed it said they were less willing to mentor the female or to hire her. They also said they'd hire her at less cost, less salary. There was nothing different on the resume except the name. This is an implicit bias. The people reading it have a picture of a lab manager, which seems male. And it doesn't matter what the resume said, they preferred the male. So this is something that impacts us, and we have to know about it. We have to check our own biases, because women and men were both doing the evaluating. Another term, stereotype threat, and how it plays out even in self-assessment. Stereotype threat. Phenomenon that occurs when there is an opportunity or perceived opportunity for an individual to satisfy or confirm a stereotype. The charts at the bottom will help me explain what this is. So if you get a group of students together and you say something like, we're going to take this math test, and if you don't say anything at all, in the States, there is still some strange perception that men do better at math. You can also have some discussion which has a little underlying comment about that. You don't have to say it specifically, just maybe some sort of sideways references of some name of a great mathematician that was male. The students take the test. The women do less well than the men. If you have a bunch of students come together to take the same math test, and you discuss how this particular math test was generated by a set of faculty who know how to generate gender neutral math tests. So you take away any preconceived notion, you tell them everybody should be allowed to do the same, and guess what? They do the same. It's a self-fulfilling thing. If we think someone's supposed to be bad at something, they often come out and do bad at it. This research has been done when it comes to sports. You bring certain people together and you tell them that some activity that they have to do is the same activity as someone would do in basketball. In our country, a lot of the basketball players are Black. So you bring this group together, you say whatever activity it is somehow an activity that a lot of good basketball players can do well. Everybody does the activities. The Blacks do well, the whites don't. You bring another group together, you say that activity, it's just some activity. I don't know. Someone thought it, just do it. The Blacks and the whites do the same. They can show this over and over, this stereotype threat. It's like a self-fulfilling thing in our heads. We need to get rid of it. In terms of self-assessment, if we're in a male field and someone asks us, do we think we're going to do well on this activity? Because we think it's a male field, we often say we won't do as well as a male will say they do. If someone tells us, yeah, you're in a male field, but this particular thing, everybody seems to be competent at it, then they ask you, so how do you think you'll do on this? The men and the women respond the same. So our minds are very strong on this stuff. Something else, double bind. So this is the idea where we'd like our bosses, we'd like our collaborators to be good, competent, and likable, easy to work with. But for women, people don't perceive us as both, especially if we're working in an area that is male dominated. So the figure here tells this story. If you ask people to evaluate a man and a woman on their performance, and you give them specifics, they did this much research, they did this many reports, they talked to this many people, they wrote this many papers, whatever, and it's very concrete, and they were both doing a good job, then people say they were successful. They did a good job. And both of them about the same amount. Okay. You ask them, without any other information, is the female or the male likable? People will say the female is less likable. They assume if the person's in a male dominated field and they did well, the only way they could have done well was to be hostile and grabby and I don't know, not easy to get along with. If you do the other situation, you bring two people, man and women, and you evaluate them. They're in this field. I don't know. They're doing fine, whatever. But tell me, you don't give them a lot of concrete information. They will expect that the woman didn't do as well because she's in the male field. If you ask the likability in that situation, well, they like them both. There was nothing to make the woman seem hostile. So there's this issue that it's hard for us to be perceived as both when we're the minority in the field, right? So it means that we need to, number one, make sure that people are evaluating us when they know true indicators, actual data. And then we need to make sure to somehow include information in that data that points out we are likable. So information about collaboration. Maybe little highlights. A collaborator said, never had more fun working with someone, never found someone more responsive, right? Something to nail a piece of information so that they get over this perception. Well, probably the person's hard to deal with if they're so successful. Okay, how do we affect change? That was an example of how to, sort of overcome that. But the bottom line is we are minorities in our field. We will be for a while. The field is considered male dominated. So the first thing is we need to make sure that we ourselves and our younger colleagues realize nothing about us is set in stone. This is called the growth mindset. We can learn new things, actually how to behave, how to respond, as well as technical things. If we come into college and our 3D spatial thinking is not the same as some of our other colleagues, we can learn it, right? We need to be aware of that. If we're performing a certain way, it could be because of a stereotype threat thing. We can actually expand our mind and possibly do better on that activity. We need to raise awareness about these unconscious biases, just like I'm telling you today. They exist. Every study shows it comes out, and that's part of our lives. But we need to name it when we see it. We need to call it out in a gentle way, and we need to check our own biases. We need to focus on competence when we are reviewing others, and when we ask people to review us, we need to give them the data that they need in order to see factually we are both competent and we can get along with people. We need to recruit more women into STEM majors, and hopefully we will get to this 50-50, just like they are in biology and in math. That means that we're going to have to explain what we do, explain that it helps people. We know that young women like to take on fields where they really feel that they're helping society. Engineering does help society. Everything around us, like I said, in the built world is because of engineers. So that's, we need to get that message out. And then we need to be willing to mentor our high school students, our college students, whatever is behind us. We need to be able and willing to talk to them, share things that have been hard, but also talk about things that have been rewarding. And finally, work on this retention and promotion. Ask for clear criteria for success and for transparency in the review process. So my final comments here on the art of being a female engineer, I will just summarize a few things that we have already discussed. I didn't say it, but I think it's important, no matter what career you're in, no matter where you are in life, keep a sense of humor, because crazy things happen. And sometimes it's to our detriment. So you have to be able to laugh a few things off. Define your priorities, put your time in where you think it's important. Find ways to provide those qualitative measures of your productivity. Seek out allies and mentors, and be a good ally and a mentor. Strategize. My meeting example for strategy. You know you're going into a meeting, you know something you feel is very important is going to be on the meeting plan, and you're going to bring up a solution. And it's happened in the past, you bring up the solution, and it's like no one hears it. It's a good solution. But for whatever reason, again, the minority may get a little bit, we don't listen so much to that person. Before the meeting, talk to a few of your allies. If this comes up, I'm going to propose this. I have a feeling people aren't going to pay too much attention. Could you, after a minute or two, raise your hand and say, hey, I really think that might be a good idea that so-and-so said. There's a lot of meeting strategy stuff that people talk about. I've been to several negotiation workshops where they talk about knowing what's going to be said, knowing who in the room are your allies, sitting certain places, so that you have a little bit of power structure in the room. It doesn't hurt for important things to take a little time to do these pre-meeting activities. Reflect and ask others when something happens and you think it's because of an unconscious bias. You think that, I don't know, someone's just mean or trying to cut you out of something, not give you credit. and you think it's maybe malicious or even unconscious, it doesn't hurt to sometimes stop and say, is that really true? Am I crazy? Did that happen? To recount what happened to someone else and have them tell you, oh, I know that person. And you know what? They do that to everybody. And it's not just about this. And so it can take some pressure off of you. And it can also, maybe they also say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. That person shouldn't have done that. And you know then that you probably need to have some discussions. Final thing, pick your battles. Know which ones are worth it. Know which ones are going to harm you more than they're going to help you. Figure out another way to work around it if it's going to harm you too much. Know that other people may have challenges not based on a minority status in what they're doing, not based on gender, but on something else. Figure out if there's a way to couple your hope for a better situation with that, so it's not just about you. Finally, enjoy what you do or change it. I do not want to encourage anybody to leave engineering, but if you are not enjoying your field, everything else is super hard. It could be as simple as asking for a different project. You can stay in engineering, but just ask, for different project partners. Look for a different company, look for a different university. I don't say leave the field. Well, I tell you, all those women that were in front of me that left BU, most of them landed at other universities, much better situation for them. Most of them did amazingly well, became, deans after a while, provosts, had huge research successes. But they did, most of them, except for maybe two, stayed really in STEM. And that makes me happy. But they needed a change. And I do not blame them for leaving. Finally, I just thought I'd end with this picture, show you some of my wise allies. This is from a few years ago. But what I like about this picture is, yes, they're all women. We do not need just women allies. We need men too. But this group was all women, but there's a senior faculty, there's junior faculty, there's middle faculty. There's 4 nationalities. We have Swedish, Indian, Korean, and US. There's a person who's not even a faculty member, but works on outreach. And we're all in different fields. So one was health sciences, one was physics, electrical engineering, biology, and mechanical engineering. We supported each other because in each of our programs, there weren't very many people that we could rely on, right? But we looked across programs and found each other. And some of them are still in my deep, strong network. So anyway, I encourage you to find that kind of support. It helps make life easier to get through. You can all laugh about the crazy, horrible things that happen and just let them go or strategize on how to deal with them. And it really just helps to have sounding boards. So thanks for listening. I want to say good luck to all of you in your engineering endeavors or your general STEM endeavors if you're not specifically engineering. And then I just put a couple references there. There's 2 main studies that I took a lot of the sociological statements from. It's a good bringing together of a lot of that work. So I guess I have a couple of minutes for questions or comments, and good luck to you all.
Thank you very much, Sheryl. Yes, so we have a few minutes for questions. Here I see some claps here in the comments. And let me see. Yes, I can see my video now. Okay. So I don't know if any of the attendees would like to make a question. You can probably open your microphone, or if not, you can probably write it in the chat section here. And in the meantime, I would like to really thank you for this interesting talk, Sheryl. I would like to tell you that we have one science outreach group that is actively promoting these ideas of science and engineering. Actually, Cesar, who is regulating these technical aspects of this talk, and Rosma they are our people in charge of this science outreach group, and they are doing a pretty good job trying to interested students from very, very early stages, from the garden to just the degrees that are about to enter here at the university. And let me see, have some questions here from Sarah says, hi, thanks for sharing your experience. Will you consider misogynia is also a barrier for girls who wants to participate in STEM areas?
So is the idea of misogynia, is that misogyny? Is that the like machismo and ism, these sorts of things all together, that there's a presentation of men? So yes, of course. No, I understand. It is, but we're not going to get rid of it soon. And so I think what's important is that we show people ways to laugh it off, to look and label that person and know that's the kind of response you're going to get. Find quips back when they say something that's completely ridiculous, and hope that that person doesn't have a lot of control in the promotion situation, right? Or in the review situation. They do sometimes. But I do think that if we can teach young women to be strong against it, I mean, not always saying something back, but knowing that they can label it, that it's not them, that it's, you know, it's not it's not us, it's that person, it's a reflection bad on that person. I think it can help. And I've certainly had my share of narcissists, you know, saying crazy things and trying to undermine even the women in science and engineering group because it wasn't enough about them. And I'm like, but you're the white man. Why should it be about you? You know, but we tried to just label it and move on. So it is a problem. I don't think it's going to go away. So finding ways to support each other against it is my best solution right now.
Thanks. There's another question here. What is the best way to start or promote a support group like WISE in our school?
And so if you are asking for WISE as faculty, which was our focus, was the faculty, the best way to do it is to find some women faculty in a few departments who are willing to have some discussions. If you can find those few, then you go to leaders like Professor Gonzalez and you say, can we use a conference room centrally located and invite some people for a conversation? And you reach out then to all the women faculty you can find, and you just ask people to come. This is how we started. In the first meetings, we asked for generic statements about how they felt their department was for giving information about child leave, about family, you know, work-life balance things, about understanding salary and promotion, and just tried to understand the unevenness in departments. So we knew where we started. And then we formulated a plan that we could take to the chairs and the deans and say, we would gladly look at data with you, talk with you, but we would need a little bit of funding for, you know, a meeting once in a while for something. And then you try to build it from there. If this is about the undergraduate level, there's already a Society of Women and Engineers, a Society of Women Engineers. I would say that you would go to that group and you would ask if they would be willing to do a joint meeting, because there's probably a women in biology group and a women in physics group, and you know what I mean? And see if you would be willing to do a joint meeting across the undergrad program groups. And it doesn't have to formally become WISE. It can just know that they could share information and activities across them.
Thanks, Sheryl. I have to say that you can count on that support from my perspective to support those meetings. And if you are on the refreshments or something, we can certainly provide, and also the space for meeting. For sure, you can count on that. There's another question here. They say, really interesting talk. I have a question. What would you consider the biggest challenge that you have to face like a female engineer?
So my biggest challenge, personally, my biggest challenge is, again, if it's personal, it's related to you and your situation. My biggest challenge is the salary issue. Like I said, I made some decisions at one point in my career, which meant that some salary reviews showed I didn't have as many papers or as many proposals. And understandably, in those years, you would see that there shouldn't be maybe as much raise if that was what they said was important. I have two problems with that. One is that at the time, I tried to make my case that, again, you can't do it all. And that there was so much need on this other activity, the WISE activity, that someone had to do it, and I was willing, and that took time, and I should get credit for that. So I have attempted to make people see the review process has to be a little more holistic. I understand they want papers, they want grants, but I think that they need to look at other contributions that people make and understand if those contributions are important to the institution at the moment. And I think this can happen to others. I think that you can see something that is very important, and the people above you who are actually the ones with the problem, and if you solve it, it makes them look better, they still don't put weight on the effort that you're putting into that activity. So what I'd like to say is that that information at a certain point in my career has now stuck. So even though after that was over and I stopped doing that, some other people took over and it morphed into a slightly different group, and I brought my grants back up and had some students, more students and stuff, the people doing the review still think that I was doing nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? So for me, I think these biases and these ideas that if you contribute in a way that's not exactly what they have in their cookie cutter path, women do tend to do this, contribute in ways not exactly the cookie cutter path because we're not cookie cutter males. This is a big challenge. Luckily, like I said, I enjoy what I'm doing. I do make enough money. It just is annoying when you look across other people that it's not the same. There's the gap.
Great, thanks. I don't see any other question here.
Okay.
I have to say that also regarding this previous question about the connection with this Society of Women Engineers, let me tell you that it's an active chapter going on here. And I believe that we can make this connection. I see a hand raised from Karima. Let's see if we can open her microphone.
Yeah, thanks. Sheryl, as a leader, what would you say would be like the best tips and tricks you could give us as engineer, like as female engineerings, and regarding leadership that I consider is one of the best and most important aspects of being an engineer in Mexico or worldwide? You as a leader, what would you tell us could be better for us to look forward?
Can I just make sure, do you mean like as you're a new engineer yourself, which things you should work on, or you want to be leader, and so as a leader, which things you should work on?
Yeah, like maybe as a female engineer, like general leadership, but focused on on being a female engineer.
Yeah. So again, I think if you're looking at just your career in engineering, the best thing to do is to, eyes and ears open on what are the criteria that people are going to review you by, so that you can meet those criteria, because that will be your first thing. You need to thrive in your profession, okay? If that's the focus. If you want to talk about other things that you'll do outside of your engineering day and your company or your classes or whatever stage you're at, then I think the important thing is this connection with other female engineers so that people have the conversations to label what are the fishy things in your specific university or your specific company, because sometimes they're different, right? So, some places the issue is that certain management is a little hostile to women. Another place, it's that they never ever talked about what happens if you have a child. There's no policy about that. So getting together with some people at your place to talk about their experience so you know you're not alone, and to help figure out what the main things are that you could bring to management and say, there's these two things that we think if they could get addressed. So-and-so in the main office who is like unwilling to talk to women, and the fact that, the women's lavatory is never serviced. I mean, it can be crazy stuff like that, but things that make the environment, so figuring out what those are. And then, like I said, it could be really important, like there's no leave policy. We're never going to have women that are allowed to have kids at this company. Do you know, like, how does that work? So figuring that out, I think bringing people together to identify the main barrier at that moment so that you can have the discussion. That's what you need to do if you're in that leadership side of things.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karina. Daniela has a question, and then Sandra. Go ahead, Daniela.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like to know, you mentioned recruiting people, women to STEM. So I would like to know more about how we can do that, more so in our inner circles, like younger sisters, younger cousins, because, well, we can do outreach programs like we have in our university. But, well, it's more like from my experience, from what I like, I would like to know how can I transfer that into other people closer to me. Yeah, basically that's that.
Yeah. So it is a tough question. It depends on how like the high schools and the elementary schools work. I'm hearing that there is a nice program right at your university for outreach, and it sounds like you're connected a bit. So if you want to do what I would say the less formal, way of connecting, honestly, wearing, gear earrings to family events, wearing airplanes, wearing, jewelry that is obviously mechanical to events, it's a conversation starter. And you can tell, you can talk to kids, or you can give a gift to a nephew or a niece, or maybe whisper in their ear to give gifts to their friends that are somehow connected, right? Small Lego things, a magazine on the newest things in wind energy, something that's technical that you can just like start infiltrating so they know there's these needs around us. And continuing to put yourself, making sure people know the latest project that you worked on, 2 steps down the way is going to help provide cleaner water. But we needed to understand a piping system first, or, whatever it is, trying to talk about what you do or what your friends do with younger generation, anytime you're around them, talking about it and making sure you tell them how it is good for people that you are doing it. Because then they get interested. They can say, oh, I could help that way. People want to be helpers. They want to make our climate better. They want to make our neighborhoods better, safer, right? So if you can do anything in a conversation to bring up how those technical fields are so important to our world, I think that's the key. That's the informal side.
Thanks, Sheryl. There's a question from Professor Sandra Nava, who says, thanks, Sheryl. How do you combine your professional life and your personal life I'm referring above all to the time aspect.
So Emilio will understand this. I am no JD who is currently the dean at Ohio Northern who sleeps 3 hours a night. So this is not how I combine. I'm a human compared to him, and I do take my 8 hours. But I think the way that it has worked for me is that I do not have a spotless house. It's a bit of a mess at most times. Emilio has visited different years. He can attest to that. But it's okay. Dishes left, whatever, I'll get to it, or someone else will get to it. I do get help, right? So I do have someone come in and help. I have a husband who helps. I had, when my kids were little, help. I don't know if my mom is still listening, but my mom, and this happened with several faculty. So if you can have perfectly nice in-laws or parents who, when you have to go for a conference, are willing to come and stay with your family, it's very helpful. Some people who don't have that, their parents are too far away or are working themselves or have passed away, then they look for friends. So, I didn't have this, but I have a colleague who, when she would go on a conference, her person in her department, who was her good friend, would help out that, the kids would go to that house after school or something like this. And then they would trade when that person had to go to a conference. So it's like thinking around, ways to bring help in. The other thing I will tell you is that, before Zoom, we had Skype. And my mom will tell you, there were nights when my husband had to be away. So 2 working people, sometimes it was me away, sometimes it was him. He would go away and I had to figure out finishing my grading and getting both kids bathed into the bed. And I would call my mom and I would say, can you get on Skype and read to my older one while I give the bath to the younger one? And she would, because they could entertain long enough, do you know? So finding, and this was way before Zoom, this is way before people were doing this virtual connection, but it made sense to me. They didn't even have FaceTime yet, right? 18 years ago, I don't think FaceTime was a thing. So this is one thing that makes it possible. The other thing I will tell you is that on my professional life side, I have made some decisions where, I'm not going to move until my kids are finished at a certain school. This means I put up with this or this or this, but it's a decision. And, it changes whether you can take a promotion or not, right? But you just have to make some decisions like that. And that's happened. But again, I'm at peace with them because I like my family peace as well as the other, The other thing I will suggest, when my kids were younger, I would combine, you can't sit at a desk all day. It's not possible. It's not healthy. So you have to get exercise. And so I combined my exercise with time with the kids. My kids liked sports. So I coached their soccer and ran with them. Or we'd go outside and we'd practice their soccer or practice some other sport where I get my exercise. Now they're older, they don't want me around their sport. So now I can go to my own exercise class. But when they were little, I combined that because I know I needed to stand up from my desk and do something in the evening. So yeah, the other thing I will say is my family, and I don't know that this is good, I'm just saying it's a trade-off. We don't sit down and have dinner together very often. This got worse as the kids got older and they had different activities. But even when they were younger, I didn't always have like a great meal ready and we'd sit down. And my husband didn't have a great meal ready and we'd sit down. We sometimes sort of stood around in the kitchen and ate whatever we had. So I don't know that that's good. I don't know that everybody's willing to make that trade-off. But this is what I'm saying, that I don't think you can have it all. I don't think you can have the perfect family dinner every night, clean house, everybody happy and work. But what we have, this kind of mess in between, I love. So.
Thanks, Sheryl. Yeseli has her hands raised. Go on, Yeseli.
Yes, thanks. Nice to meet you. And my question is, how do you consider the possibilities at this time for Mexican women engineers to work in your country?
How do I say it one more time? How do I feel that the Mexican female engineers?
Yes, work in your country in this moment.
So how are they perceived, or are they getting jobs, that sort of thing? I guess, let me answer something. You tell me if I answer it. So one thing I know is that like people from your university who should want to pursue a graduate program in a US university, I think that, you know, if you did fine as an undergraduate, you would be very, very sought after. I think that there is now in the US a true hope that we can get better numbers of women and different types of women from different places in the world to bring more diversity to our program. So if you want to come and do a graduate program, I think the odds are very good. I think for companies, I can't say how the hiring is going, if they like to hire from outside the US or from inside the US. I'm not sure. I do know that companies are becoming more aware of trying to get diversity. And this means, again, different countries, different religions, different you know, training. But I don't know how much they look from outside and how easy it is for them to get visas for students, not for students, but for employees. I know the student visa thing last year was bad, but this year it's supposed to be better. I don't know if that's the question you asked. Did I answer the right question?
Yes, yes, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Sheryl. I can probably comment that we consider our university to be probably one of the third of the best 5 universities in Mexico. And in this position, I probably have to promote our students to pursue graduate studies, maybe at your university or some other universities in the US. And I will certainly encourage them to apply to make all this process required in order for them to get admitted to a graduate school. I will probably ask you if I can probably provide your contact data in case that there are so many persons interested in
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And I have to say that we have made this effort, for instance, to have our bachelor degree programs accredited by ABET. We have currently 6 bachelor degree programs that are currently approved, or the word will be like accredited by ABET, which is this organization that accredits the programs in the United States.
Yes.
We also have pursued that, and I believe that this helps a bit for them in order to get a job in the US. There is also conditions that every state has to approve, but we are doing our part in trying to demonstrate that the quality of our programs is good, at least to be accredited by this organization. I see the hands raised by Natalia, and probably go ahead, Natalia.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, Sheryl. Well, my question is, what is the best advice for an engineering student that you give us? Or what did you want to tell you when you was at university, when you was in the university, sorry?
So, yeah, I mean, it's actually a tricky question, right? Because I didn't do engineering as an undergrad. I did math. What would be a good advice for a female engineer? So let me tell you one thing that I have told some of my advisees. I think it's less strong now in the United States, but when I first started as a faculty member, this is something I saw, and I think it has to do, it's related to this stereotype threat that I mentioned, and self-assessment. What I saw when I first started as a faculty member was I'd have a classroom, some women, not too many, and men. And then I'd have advisees, some women, some men. And they'd do their program. And then I would see women who ended up with like maybe grades. Do you do A, B's, and C's like that for grades, or do you do numbers, Emilio?
With the numbers from 0 to 10.
Okay, so women that would end up with like 7s, 8s, maybe some 6s, okay, we say kind of middle, they would be very upset, and they sometimes would leave the program. The men, they were happy with 8s and 7s and 6s. Well, it's all good, it's fine, you know? And I think this is this sort of self-assessment. The women were harder on themselves. They had to be better in order to stay. And I guess that I told them, you know, it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay. And I think we feel sometimes we have to be perfect because we're weird. We're the only one. People know us, you know, and they're looking at our grades. But somehow I feel like it's okay to be normal, average, you know, and still stay in it if you like it. So I do think that people need this encouragement. I think the other thing is that, like I said, I learned as I went through my graduate program to be a little more confident that if you work on something hard, you know the fundamental of it, yeah? You may not know every single aspect, but you know the fundamental, and that's enough. You can have confidence that you can present that and you can handle questions on it. So again, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be grounded and you have to have done some work to know what you know. And I guess that's, again, back to this, you know, be a little kind to yourself and have some confidence over what you do know. Yeah.
Great. I don't know that they solved the question. I think it does. Let me read this comment from Mariela. It says, thank you for sharing your successful career. I will stay with your phrase, enjoy what you do or change it. Thank you very much. You are a great example of life, and I couldn't agree more with that idea.
Thank you.
Sheryl, I would like to wrap up our conference today, but I would like to share with you this. Let me see if you can see it here. This is kind of a reconocimiento or a diploma that says, I want to read it in Spanish. La Universidad Autónoma de San Luis Potosí, a través de la Facultad de Ingeniería, otorga el presente reconocimiento a la profesora Sheryl, PhD, Boston University, por su valiosa participación como ponente en la conferencia The Art of Being a Female Engineer, moderador, un servidor, el cual se llevó a cabo el día 1 de junio del 2021. Siempre autónoma, por mi patria educaré, San Luis Potosí, y firma un servidor como director de la facultad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheryl. And I'm sure that you will get this in paper. I will send it to you. It will, you know, the letters from here to the US take a couple of months.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm sure they will mail it to you today, so you can have in a couple of months.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thanks. I'm glad so many people listened. I hope there was a nugget that you could take, like the one that she said, that Mariela said. I hope there was something for everybody, but good luck. Do well.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to everyone who attended this conference. I'm sure it left some great opportunities for you, great ideas, and also a great opportunities for you to pursue this important career in engineering. And also we like, as I said earlier, we like to foster really this participation of women in engineering. And here in myself, you have an ally in order to help you go through this difficult, have this 5-year program in engineering. I know it's not easy, but here you have an ally in order to help you to go through these studies in engineering. Thank you again, Sheryl. Thank you very much for sharing your presentation with us. And hopefully I will be able to bring you here once this pandemic, I think, reduces a little bit. It will be great to have you here in our university.
Will be wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.